someone that everybody knows. Everybody knows. You don't need to see him in advertisement to know who he is around these parts. His name is Ed Too Tall Jones. And, obviously Cowboys legend. And he weighed in on the Cowboys' woes, why they continue to come up short in the playoffs. And I'm interested to see, Fred, what you, along with the Tolos, think about his assessment of this team, which, this team has been confounding. We've looked at them like, this is a team that wins 12 games. Like, this is a good team. I've been frustrated because I've watched them throughout these games and be like, they have the capability. The last 3 years, they have the capability to be good, and then they go up and they don't play to their potential. I feel like I'm somebody's mom or dad, where I'm like, you have so much potential. You're not A's and B's don't C's don't represent your capability here. You can do better. And Ed Too Tall Jones feels like he has a finger on the pulse of why that is. And he says, quote, where am I? If you look at these teams now that make the playoffs, like Buffalo, Baltimore, all those teams, they don't have anyone on those teams that won a Super Bowl in that locker room. He said, quote, the regular season is the regular season. It is what it is. To be a champion, you've got to be able to get to another level. What separates good players and good teams is teams who have players who can go to another level in big games. Every general manager in the league should be out trying to pick up a guy that gets cut or someone who's been to a Super Bowl and put him in that locker room. It makes a big difference. He also went further to say, talking about, is having enough players with championship experience the main thing holding the Cowboys back? And he said that is definitely one of the things. The team plays too well every year, win 12 games every year, different animal in the playoffs. And he said, let me say this in McCarthy's defense. Coaches can't do it all to put you over the top. You have to have internal leadership. It's not just talking about captains. I'm talking about a guy in the locker room that's been there, done that, knows what he's talking about, and the players will follow. Fred, what do you think about Ed Too Tall Jones saying that it's the internal leadership? It's not having players that have been to the promised land on this roster that's getting them looking bad every year.
Look, I don't think he's, and shame on me for saying that, but no, I don't disagree with him. I think you definitely need veteran leadership. I think you definitely need guys that have been there before, because there is that certain level that I think guys have to get to when the moment gets big, right? When that pressure starts to ratchet up, because what have we all heard before? That the pace of the game gets faster in the playoffs versus the regular season. I mean, we've heard it from guys time and time again. And so, I'll go back to the year the Chiefs won their first Super Bowl. They picked up Terrell Suggs that in the middle of the season. And Terrell Suggs was playing on fumes at that point. But he was a spot guy, and he'd won a Super Bowl before. But it's that locker room leadership. It's the things that he can tell you about that guys that haven't been there before look at across the town. I mean, that again, I think that's one that we can talk about. We can talk about Paul George going to the 76ers all we want. To me, the biggest deal that was made in the offseason was Klay Thompson going to the Mavericks. Klay's won 4 of them. There's no moment is going to be too big for Klay Thompson this upcoming season. It will get too big for Joel Embiid and Paul George and Tyrese Maxey, because they have not been to the same places that Klay Thompson has been. And so when you look at what they've done, and so, extrapolating that and, putting it to football, I can see where, yes, it would be nice to have somebody. You brought in a veteran. You brought in an Ezekiel Elliott. Okay, great. He's been the same place you've been. I mean, and again, I don't know how easy it is to just go say, hey, let's just go get a former Super Bowl winner. I mean, they're out there. But again, you got to find, what's the right fit?
Well, Fred, on the text line, we have people bringing up some stuff like they brought up from the 817. This team added Stephon Gilmore to the locker room last year, who had been to that place. Not quite the same guy, but Brandon Cooks has been a veteran guy that came in this past season and tried to offer some of that.
Who do you win one with? The Patriots?
Cooks or Gilmore?
Gilmore
won with the Patriots. Was
yeah.
Cooks on that roster as well?
I want to say, yeah, he was on one of those.
It's hard to keep up because Brandon Cooks
has played on half the teams in the NFL, so that's hard to keep up with. I mean, again, that's all well and good, and Stephon Gilmore's had a great role for the Cowboys, and he was good for you last year. All right, but I mean, I don't know that I remember anybody saying, like Stephon. I think in some cases you need a guy that's going to be maybe a difference maker, or again, when you've got a team that's rolling, a dude that just adds that supplement. And I guess, with Stephen Gilmore, I mean, look, he's on the back half of his career or whatever, but
sure.
You know, I mean, hey, it helped, I'm sure. And I mean, we never heard anything negative about him in the locker room. I get what El Too Tall Jones is saying, but at the same time, too, I do feel like that helps when you've got boss hogs at other positions.
Here's the thing, and I feel wild presumptuous that I'm about to say this, because I am Reginald Atatula, dude who says things into microphones, and that's Ed Too Tall Jones. You know what his resume is.
He's too tall.
He got a nickname that we have to say every time we say his name.
Got to.
Have you ever heard anybody call him Ed Jones? I haven't. It's always Ed Too Tall Jones. You got to say all four of them words. I don't have that kind of credibility. However, I'm still going to stand up and say, I disagree with him here.
Okay.
And I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. The thing that keeps getting me about this Cowboys team is not some level of nebulous experience. It's just when the time gets to that place, they play like below their capability in various different ways. And like it feels like they make the margins thinner on themselves in a lot of different ways. A lot of different ways, right? Because the margins are already thin when you get to this level in the playoffs, right? That's the distinction for me between the regular season and the playoffs. The margins are thinner because we're playing. Everybody's good in the playoffs. We've sorted out all the bad teams. We are now in just playing good teams, so the margins are thinner in that way. But then also like things like, hey, how about you run a modernized offense? Or even if we go back prior to Mike McCarthy this past year, where people can kind of predict your offense. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, Kellen Moore's offense coordinator. Fantastic when it comes to metrics, when it comes to play sequencing. I think that was something that he was not as good at. That narrows the margins, and you give yourself less and less room for error. And we know that error is going to happen at times. You're dealing with humans, and I feel like those are just the small portions of the ways in which all the way around this team. And you can also take this to the front office, which I'm sure a lot of people are super excited to, like the opportunities that you have to fill gaps. They have not taken advantage of that. The instances where they have not been stringent on making sure that they are maximizing their salary cap because they're not signing players at the right times, or they're giving too much money to certain players that they shouldn't give necessarily, right? And this is further back, but giving Jalen Smith a deal, giving Michael Gallup a deal coming off of an injury, like things like that where you narrow the margins, and it feels like they do that in so many different places that you give yourself the slimmest, narrowest window to creep through, and when you don't miss it, we're surprised. And I feel like you add another player of some veteran status. Is he going to fix those things? Because I don't think that veteran player can fix those things.
I don't know that he can fix all those things that you just mentioned, but I would also argue, too, that your roster has been pretty well constructed the last 3 seasons.
Sure.
I mean, it's just been a matter. I mean, your roster didn't lose the game to San Francisco 2 years ago, right? I mean, that was just you just lost. You know, your roster was you had the best path you could have possibly asked for going into last season. You had the number 7 seed at your place that, again, you were better than on paper in every capacity, and you went out and got your doors blown off. So I guess to what you're saying, when you hit these moments where guys don't seem to rise to the occasion, I mean, how much better if you had a guy on that defensive line that had been to a Super Bowl, how much does that help a Micah Parsons? You know what I'm saying? How much does that help a CeeDee Lamb? You know what I mean? And you just wonder, again, it's not like you're going to necessarily find a difference maker, but if you can find a role player, if you can find a guy, and again, I'm using a basketball example because I can't think of anybody right off the top of my head from a Super Bowl perspective, but, if you add an Andre Iguodala type, you know what I'm saying? A guy who's a solid dude inside the locker room and is going to give you solid minutes or solid snaps on the field. And I think that might, make up for what you're talking about when it seems like this team just can't. Because, again, 2 years prior, it seemed like this team just couldn't get over the hump. Last year when you thought, okay, we're finally ready, we're knocking on that door. And then, of course, the door flew the other way and you got kicked off the porch.
Yeah, look, I'm sure that would be helpful, but I find it hard to believe that it's just a leadership. It feels like there's just so many places around that I can't pinpoint just one thing. It feels like there's a lot of places where there's a little bit of a leak. You know what I mean? And
I think that's what Ed Too Tall's saying, is that leak gets filled or gets fixed with veteran leadership, because when you start slipping up, you need a guy that's been there, done that to say, hey, sometimes this is where it comes down to for me with football. And this is where football is just a little bit different. For years, and I get it. I hate to use Houston examples, but that's where I've been for the last 12 years, so that's what I got to go by. Houston has been anti, and you know this. The Texans have been this anti. We're not going to sign any guys with character, questionable characteristics. Okay, Chiefs, on the other hand, hey, we feel good in the culture we've got. We're going to do it. Cowboys have never really shied away from that in some cases, right? Like, maybe a guy's got
Blue Star Special.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sometimes you need guys you need those kind of dudes that are just a little off or a little throwed sometimes, because guess what? As long as I can keep him on the straight and narrow on Monday through Saturday, I know what I'm going to get on Sunday.
Yeah, but this is the thing. You just pointed to the idea. The Cowboys have done that as well, too. Right? Like, they've done that as well. I feel like, again, it's just you need to maximize all the things, including the factors that are off the field. And I don't know how a veteran player is going to help you make sure your offense is modernized, make sure that you're calling the right plays at the right time and putting your guys in the right position. Like, it just feels like as an organization, and I don't even necessarily mean that they're bad at everything.
Yeah.
But if you take 5% here and 5% there and 5% there, where you're just off of working at maximum efficiency, those add up to gaps that then make it harder for you to get to, even if you're playing at a certain level. And as we saw, especially against the Packers, you weren't playing at a certain level. You got outcoached. You got outplayed, right?
Well,
and all those things come together.
Look, Tom Brady could have been on that roster. I don't know that would have made much of a difference.
And I think that's the
So,
frustration I have, is I'm coming off of a game like that and listening to Ed Too Tall Jones, who is, look, again, want to make it clear, more bona fides than I might ever have, right? But, like, tell me that, hey, man, they just need some guys that have been there before. And I'm like, are they going to be all the guys? Is it going to be all the guys now that we're changing?
I don't think it's all the guys, but again, this is where, as you alluded to, with the right moves, and this is where your GMs come into play, and this is a whole nother conversation, because I already know folks have been chiming in as far as Jerry and his kids are concerned when it comes to running this football team and picking the players and what have you, that's what separates championship teams versus teams that can't quite get over that hump, is making those signings like you alluded to that, again, maybe they're not superstar signings, maybe they don't sign for huge deals, but they know their roles and they do exactly. If a guy gets hurt, they step up in the right time, so that way if you do lose a running back, you do lose a tight end, you do lose a linebacker, the second-team guy comes in and you don't miss a beat. And that's what the Cowboys seem to be fumbling with, and when the lights get too bright, we've seen what's happened.
Maybe so. But ultimately, I'm still going to, especially in a sport that's so authoritatively structured, where the hierarchy places so much power in the hands of your coach and those types of things, it feels like there's way too much slip in those places for me to go and be like, hey, you need somebody who's been there to get these boys in line. What about the infrastructure that's supposed to be able to get these boys in line and get them playing as best as they possibly can? That's where I look.
I guess my question would be, what keeps happening in the playoffs, right? Because, again, you're good for 17 games. You do the damn thing for 17 games, and suddenly you spit the bit, and it's like you've never coached a football game in your life, and then something. I would be more interested to see or understand what. And again, this is where the Mike McCarthy thing comes into play, because, again, he did this towards the end of his. We can say what we want about Aaron Rodgers and the fact that he's only got one Super Bowl. I mean, again, he was a lot of that time he spent with Mike McCarthy, who, much like the Cowboys. This is why I brought this up in the crosstalk with the G-Bag Nation, where he reminds me a lot of Marty Schottenheimer. Great coach in the regular season, but for whatever reason, he gets brain freeze, and suddenly this guy can't coach his way out of a wet paper sack in the playoffs. And like you said, it's not just the players, but from an organizational standpoint, from the top down, starting with your head coach, this team just cannot get out of its own way come playoff time.
It might be like voodoo or something. Have we considered that? Has anybody looked into the magical realms of this? Is that a possibility?
I mean, I can tell you that we definitely don't play the Saints well.
Think of it this way, all right?
We might have stumbled on something.
I'll tell you what, I like where your head's going with this, because think of it this way. Didn't the Cubs have something going on with some goat?
Supposedly.
The curse of the Billy Goat
You
Giraffe.
can take that however you want. And then let's not forget you had the curse of the Bambino. What happened, 877-881-1053, what happened after 95? Let's think about that. Did something go down? Did Jerry sell his soul a la Al Pacino, Keanu Reeves in The Devil's Own or The Devil's Advocate, whatever it is? Great movie, by the way. Have you ever seen that movie?
Nope.
Devil's Advocate? Oh, you need to check that movie out. I'm telling you right now.
Oh, he doesn't know about me and recommendations yet.
He'll learn.
Well, you don't take recommendations?
We'll talk about
All right, we will talk about that. We will talk about that. All right.